Welcome to Davos Direct right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya, Shrinate. We continue to cover the World Economic Forum right here on this channel for you. Now, while the world is hailing and there's unanimous support coming in for the Modi Sarkar, there is indeed a word of caution too. We caught up with Pulitzer Prize winner Thomas Friedman, who asserts that India's biggest advantage is its pluralist culture, which should be protected, harbored and nurtured at any cost. He's warning against the communal discourse that's gathering some space in India because he believes this can potentially undermine our biggest asset, which is the pluralist culture.
I look at the new government and the way it's talking. I think it's got a lot of good ideas for structural reform, but the proof is in the pudding, and we'll see. And it's still early. I don't think you can say, well, they just talk a game, but they haven't delivered. It's way too early. And I'm just going to watch and hope. I still I'm a big fan and believer in India's potential, and I am net optimistic right now.
The risks that face the world, and one of them is ISIS, communal tension right across the border in France. Are these potential new geographical realities that the world will have to live with? How do businesses, economies, governments adapt to something like this?
Well, I think
prepare for something like this?
I think the biggest thing to understand is that the single most important comparative advantage you can have in the world we're going into, a world where people are so mixed together now, and where top-down authority doesn't really work much anymore. Yes. The biggest advantage you can have as a country is if you have pluralism. If you have a culture that allows a lot of groups to live together and to mix. And India has that, and has to preserve it and keep it and nurture it, because it's the greatest advantage India has, that it has a culture that's enabling and empowering Hindus and Muslims and Christians and even a few Jews to live together.
But there are lots of right-wing Hindu noises being made. Do that bother you? Do that concern you in India?
That does concern me. I think it's not in India's interest, first and foremost. And having a country like India, where 1 billion plus people of so many different languages and ethnic and linguistic backgrounds live together and have regular free and fair elections, that's a miracle. Don't tamper with it. Preserve it, cherish it like just the most delicate flower.
2015, what are the bright sparks that you see for this year and the fault lines that you assess?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for the world right now is that we have a lot of what I'd call big, hard problems. They're about economic growth, they're about climate change, and there's only one way to solve a big, hard problem, and that's together, collective action, okay? And for me, the real question is on climate. Are we going to mitigate, or are we going to adapt?
That's right.
Europe. Are they going to do the structural reforms that they need to do? Are they going to mitigate, or are they just going to adapt?
That's right.
On ISIS, are we going to actually do what would be needed to reverse that trend, or are we just going to adapt to it? So everywhere I look in the world, whether it's European economic reform, climate change, Middle East, America, and many of the issues that we face, are we going to mitigate, do the real collective action that's required, or are we just going to adapt?
But the world doesn't seem to be in this together, and we are seeing a very undulated recovery of sorts, undulated action of sorts. Yeah. Let me first ask you about the US. The world is very bullish about the US economy, how it's growing at a fast pace. Do you expect this momentum to continue, or do you fear this could peter out?
Well, I do think that the reason we're moving ahead is we still have this incredibly flexible economy.
That's right.
So the government basically has to go out of its way to keep all that energy down. But imagine if we had a government that, rather than sort of keeping the energy down, was actually doing everything it could to enhance, that kind of spirit of innovation and flexibility.
You know, you spoke about ECB and you said the need for structural reforms in Europe. Draghi has done what he could. He's actually surpassed market expectations with his steroid. Do you now expect the structural reforms to take off? Because we are looking at a very fractious political geography of sorts, where Germany is not on board with what Greece wants.
No, I think what you're seeing is the default option. Well, all that was left was basically the monetary authority, because the political authorities could not get together and agree on collective action, namely because Germany's reluctance. And so the good news is Draghi moved. The bad news is Draghi's out of bullets.
That's right.
Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
What happens if and when this doesn't do the trick? So I think that's the challenge.
Now, while cheap oil continues to fuel deflationary pressures across the world, we decided to get a view from someone who's got his skin in the game, literally speaking. And which is why BP CEO Bob Dudley tells us that he expects oil prices to remain low for a prolonged period of 2 to 3 years. He also believes that companies like himself and others who operate in the energy space will rework their focus areas and their strategies, at least in investments, going forward.
Well, it does feel like it's more than just a slight correction.
That's
it is
right,
sort of
yes.
a collapse in the price.
Yes.
It is a cyclical industry. We're a very long wavelength investor. Energy is sometimes 5, 7, 10, 15 years before revenues come on. So you have to try to think through the cycle.
Right.
But we're also a business who have shareholders who demand things in the short term, so we have to rebase the company and we'll prioritize, and we will do that.
When do you see prices firm up? That's question number one. And if I can take the liberty of asking you that this crash of crude oil prices is on account of two factors. One is there is very low global demand. China is softening. And of course, the other point to this whole argument is that there is a supply glut that the world hasn't seen. Who do you see blinking first, the OPEC or the non-OPEC producers? And when do you see prices firm up?
Well, I think the point of view I hear from OPEC is that the high-cost oil is being produced in North America.
That's right.
And as a result of producing high-cost oil, they shouldn't be expected to close in their lower-cost oil. And they feel very strongly about that. And I think I don't think OPEC's going to blink first.
That's right.
And I think Chinese growth rates are coming down. It's not so much softening, but the growth rates are coming down.
That's right.
And there is still increasing production in the U.S. So I think we'll see. I could see this a couple of years, a 3-year period of rebasing. I don't think it'll be a sharp V. It might be a U shape in prices.
Talk to you about India, because that's where your big investment is. There were some fault lines, some tension along the investments. Have those eased out after the gas prices have been hacked, or is it too little too late?
Well, no, I don't. I think in some ways I'm very encouraged about the direction and all the messages and the idea of make it in India and the signals about encouraging investment. I'll see the finance minister tomorrow. We'll talk about it, and of course we're very close with Reliance on this. And there's a great opportunity for very significant investments off the east coast of India to supply gas into the country, and that has got to be better than importing expensive LNG. So I am encouraged about it.
You were obviously expecting a greater price hike in the natural gas prices. That hasn't come about. Is that a disappointment?
Well, I think time will tell here. I mean, we have to make investments that are economic and competitive in a global portfolio of investments. Of course, the oil price down, we're reprioritizing things. But again, I'm optimistic, and I think it's important for India. India needs lots of energy, and I hope we can unlock really as much as $10 billion of investment over a number of years here.
So what does this undulated recovery across the world really mean for the big, giant corporations like GE? We decided to catch up with John Rice, the vice chairman of the company. We did not just quiz him on China, US, but also spoke to him about India, where he insists that the government is taking actions on the ground. Things are picking up, but of course it's the infra deficit that continues to worry him about India.
Strength in the U.S. economy helps everybody. It helps the world grow. It's a big consumer of global goods. So there's nothing wrong with the U.S. growing, and we should all like that. And with respect to India, we're all optimistic about the new government. The growth rate looks fine. And we think that there's going to be plenty of room for companies like ours and others to grow.
I want to ask you the other question on India. It's been in the news for all the right reasons. It's making the right noises. How much of the reality has really changed on the ground for corporations like yourselves and, of course, for smaller businesses?
I think it's starting to change. As you know, the BJP, not only at the federal level, at the state level, has had good success. And I think that's going to help coalesce things around movement. So I think it will change, but big infrastructure has to move forward to be part of that change. The other thing is I think the government could take advantage of the low oil prices to start reducing to reduce subsidies so that gets taken off the table. As oil prices, as they inevitably will, start to increase.
What kind of a role do you expect GE to play, say, as far as defense is concerned?
Well, we want to play an active role. We're interested in localizing some of our activities. We're an important provider for military and jet engine technology and helicopters, and so we expect to be able to do more there as soon as the government decides what it wants companies like us to do.
We take a quick breather here on that note right here on Davos Direct, but we come back with AirAsia's Tony Fernandez, who insists it's shameful how AirAsia has been blocked in India. And of course, we get to Vishal Sikka, the philosopher CEO in the making at Infosys. Welcome back. You're still watching Davos Direct right here on ET Now. Time to get you Tony Fernandez, who heads AirAsia. He laments the very shameful way in which Indian carriers are creating hurdles and blocking AirAsia in India. He says this kind of resistance is something he hasn't seen anywhere in the world and doesn't understand why is it happening. He also had a word on SpiceJet, its revival plans, and of course how the government has played a role in this.
We're still having a tough time from the operators that are there. I think they're lobbying very hard to prevent us from really growing, which I think is a shame. I think India is changing. I had a very good interaction with the finance minister, and all the right things are being said. We hope it comes through in the aviation business, and that vested interests are not just looked after, and that people are put first. And as soon as that happens, then we have the confidence to invest in India.
Is this sort of lobbying, is this sort of, putting one business against the other peculiar to the Indian market? Have you handled something like this anywhere in the world that you operate in?
I've never seen it as strong as in India. It's, but I think Indians companies have been very experienced in protecting their own turf. I don't see why, because India is such a huge market. There's an enormous opportunity by us coming in, and a vibrant industry where we can all work together in reducing the costs, such as aviation fuel tax, developing a better airport infrastructure, and bringing more tourists in for the domestic industry. I think is good. But I remain very optimistic with the Modi government. Having heard the finance minister just yesterday,
yes,
that it's only a matter of time.
Indian aviation seems to be going through these troubles of structural reforms. Structural issues exist in Indian aviation. We first saw Kingfisher go down under, and then of course now SpiceJet, which is being bailed out. So I will first ask you the question on, are these structural issues responsible for the problem in aviation really, or is this individual airlines and their management?
It's a bit of both. A bit of both. You have Indigo doing a very good job. You've had Jet, who's gone up and down, but also doing well and has a very good product. But I think some of the airline operators lost their way, tried to do too many things. I think you see Ajay Singh talking about the fact that maybe Spice got into too many different types of aircraft.
That's right.
You had Kingfisher trying to go up market. So I think the airline industry caused some of the problems themselves, but I do think structurally this is an industry that's taxed to hell. There needs to be some structural change, and I hope federalism comes into the aviation industry as opposed to states being dominated. Federals say, okay, this is the aviation regime.
Right.
This is the airport tax regime. There's too many taxes, which I think have caused problems within the Indian aviation industry. If you compare it versus China, which is a booming industry.
Yes. I have a question to ask of you on SpiceJet. We've just seen a bailout of sorts. Ajay Singh has come back to steer the ship, if I may, and the government has played a very proactive role. What do you make of this bailout? Should airlines like SpiceJet be allowed to fend for themselves, or should the government actually play a proactive role? What do you make of this?
India doesn't need another failure as well.
That's right.
The market's big enough for all of us, and Spice has a good brand and a good product, and ultimately jobs shouldn't be lost as well if it can be turned around. There's pros and cons. I don't think this is a massive bailout of sorts, so I think the Indian government has struck the right balance, and contrary to what many people would believe, I hope Spice is very successful.
Let me ask you to be as frank as possible in this last answer. What is it about AirAsia that Indian aviation seems to fear? Why this resistance? Why this opposition to AirAsia? What is it that they fear about you?
I don't know. my hairstyle, I don't know, my greying hair. We are so small compared to
Do you believe your ability
else.
to distort the market?
I believe we have the ability to grow the market. I believe we have a strong brand. I believe we can bring many tourists to India. I believe we can open up lots of new markets. And I feel we have an ability that everyone will win. It is one of those X-file things as to why we have attracted so much attention in blocking us. But then maybe we see something that they don't, and we're better than we actually think we are. But we're street fighters. You know, we're not going to give up. I'm Indian. My father will be somewhere up there ensuring that I push this battle. I don't know if he'll ensure I win, but he won't want me to give up. And I owe it to the people of India that we give everyone a run. If the industry is controlled by 2 or 3, that's not good for India.
That's right, yes.
That's not good for India.
He's someone who draws a lot of insight from nature and life into, of course, business. And which is why I asked Vishal Sitka if he fancies himself as a philosopher CEO. But that aside, we did discuss business, the changing landscape, the focus on innovation, and of course, the decision to stick to the 2016 deadline as far as resurgence of Infosys is concerned.
I'm buried under a 90-day cycle of financial performance. So, no, I think that every once in a while trying to get some insights out of nature is a good thing. So, does that make me a philosopher? That is an interesting question to philosophize on.
Fair point indeed. But, you know, the one thing which is undisputable is that for the 5 months that you've been here, there is a certain amount of positivity that you've brought to Infosys.
Yes.
If I were to ask you from a CEO's standpoint, from the corner office, is that your biggest contribution in the last 5 months? Things were looking down, people were not feeling too good. Things are turning positive now, people are talking positively.
My goodness, I mean, 5 months is too early to look at the contribution. On the other hand, I hope that is not the most positive, but there are a lot of things that we have done. Reinforcing our educational foundation, the work that we do with training, which is the core strength that we have in the company. Consistent profitable growth is the basic metric, improved revenue as well as improved profitability. One other key thing that we are looking at is revenue per employee. I think that margin, obviously, revenue growth, but also utilization, and then augmenting people's ability with software, which will materialize in the revenue per employee. So those are some of the important metrics.
Is client spending looking big? Is the decision-making cycle once again picking up? Are you getting that sense here?
No matter what the client atmosphere is like, there is always a need for innovation.
That's right.
There is always a need for making things better, whether they are improving existing systems that people have investments in or doing new kinds of systems. So that need is not going to go away, and that is what drives us.
And when Mr. Murthy joined Infosys back, and you know, when it was Murthy 2.0 at Infosys, he set himself a 3-year timeline. He said by 2016 things will turn around. Are you going to do that before 2016, or could that get...
holding on to that timeline as well. It is about 18 months from now is what that 3-month timeline would be. So that's what I am holding myself to, and to see that we get back to a kind of a industry leading or at that growth rate at which or beating the average growth of the industry and so forth. So
we take a quick breather here, but we come back with an exclusive chat with India's Finance Minister Arun Jaitely, who's got a very warm reception here in this very cold Davos. Welcome back. You're watching Davos Direct right here on ET Now. Time to get you India's Finance Minister Arun Jaitely. Now, contrary to expectations, while many people believe that crude crash has changed the budget arithmetic, Arun Jaitely doesn't really think so. He believes that funds from other resources are still very constrained, and which is why the government may not have the elbow room for too many tax concessions. We get you a slice of that exclusive conversation.
There's a lot of money with a number of investors, with pension funds, with corporates in the United States where they're looking to invest. A large number of economies have slowed down and may not appear to be as attractive. India is one of the few which is now picking up. And a series of decisions which the government of India has taken has added to that attraction. Therefore, continuously, it's the central government, it's the state governments which has to continue to give those signals and, in effect, ease in the process of doing business. If the political system in India becomes obstructionist, then this huge advantage that has come to India, we will not be able to fully utilize it. As far as our government is concerned, we are fairly determined to go ahead.
You have taken the ordinance route for reforms. You are right in saying the government doesn't want to lose precious time. You would want to go ahead with reforms. Is that something that you've heard from the investor community? Will they wait for the Parliament's nod? And will you assure the investor community?
In the case of the insurance ordinance, and I have repeatedly told the insurance majors who have met me that we are almost certain that this ordinance will become a law. And in any case, during the life of that ordinance, whatever investment comes in is irreversible.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the law declared by the Supreme Court of India. And that adds a lot to the comfort level of the investors.
So markets have been hugely euphoric because they believe that the next 90 days will be power-packed with big-ticket reforms. Many people believe that is the one thing that's running against you because these are huge challenges. Even though you're announcing reforms on a Sunday and a Saturday, not leaving any day, is this something that you want to temper down at this stage?
I think it's always good to have contrarian viewpoints, but that's the art of edit writing and that's the art of reporting. Well, I'm not going to be impacted by that. The government has its own schedule, the government has its own pace, and as I have repeatedly said, the budget will be a very important occasion for us to demonstrate this. The next 364 days will be equally important.
And you have said that reforms are a process that one has to follow. Your budget is something that not just Indian CEOs but some of the global CEOs that we are speaking to are watching out for. Given the new global context where crude prices have crashed, where India is a shining spot amidst a neighborhood that's not looking too good, what is the elbow room that you have? Have you got a comfort zone because of prices that have gone down? Will that play in the budget making exercise?
Certainly. There is some comfort which we presently have gone. But then please remember, nobody had predicted that the oil prices will fall to this extent.
That's right.
And nobody is predicting as to what will happen in future to the oil prices. So people are not taking that gamble as yet. But yes, certainly it will help our downstream oil companies. It is helping the government in terms of subsidies. It is helping us in management of inflation along with the food prices being under control. And all this is to the advantage of Indian economy. So if inflation is under control, then rates hopefully there can be a trend as the rates can come down in future. And all this is going to add to the competitiveness of the Indian economy.
Earlier in the day today, you did mention that the government may not look at the minimum alternate tax, which the industry has been demanding on for a while. There is plenty of other demand.
I am not willing to look at that. I can't comment on these things before the budget.
Right.
The fact is that I have to see how much space for maneuver and flexibility I have. And therefore, I would have been far more comfortable if India's growth rate was in the 9% zone. I would have been far more comfortable if our manufacturing had been 6 or 7% or maybe close to a double figure. Then my revenues from other sources would have been so high that I could think in terms of some other steps to incentivize. So I'll have to analyze the complete space which is available to me for this kind of a flexibility.
Hopes are pinned on you for that rate to go back to 9%. A final question, sir, on divestment. For obvious reasons, it hasn't taken off because ONGC and Coal India are commodity companies. Commodities have crashed. Are you disappointed with the way divestment process has panned out, and will you look at it differently next year?
Well, I am not waiting till next year.
I have my answer there in a big headline. So are we going to see Coal India and ONGC happen?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to mention companies. Right. Seeing the kind of speculation which starts in the market on basis of erroneous media reports, right. I'm keeping various options open. And you wait for the last word on the subject.
That's it then. It's a wrap here on this year's coverage of the World Economic Forum in Davos. We do hope that the next year this summit does meet. The new global context would be very different. There would be peace and economic solutions around and a lot of world peace. It's a very good bye from the entire team here.
If we can continue to take decisions at the pace we are and eventually attract investment into India,
us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.